Men who have been raped. What happened? How did you recover? Was raped by an uncle, retired military, firefighter, from 7 to 13 years old. Violence and pain were his thing. Pretty standard story of using threats of killing me and my mom or my older brother if I ever spoke about it. Finally stood up to him just before my 14th birthday. From 13 to 18 years old I kind of junkied out and started down the road of self-deprecating behavior. Finally told my parents at 18 years old. And of course no one believed me. 56 now, never had any quality relationships, nor have I ever been able to find therapy to alleviate the trust and intimacy issues that I carry. So the truth of the matter is I never really recovered from it. 12K edit. This morning when I woke up and wrote these few short sentences. I never could have expected so much support and genuine compassion. I'll admit that writing the post brought a lot of things to the surface that I hadn't given any attention to in some years. And I've never spoken openly about any of this prior to today. I've only spoken to about 24 people my entire life about it. That includes 7 therapists, so to say I've been little soggy today is a bit of an understatement. I do believe a touch of my faith in humanity was restored today. Just thanks. I was 9 and with my aunt. My stomach was paining. She asked to look into it and went down on me. It happened for few years. I didn't knew what's happening that time, but when I shared it with my friends later they called me pussy. I also shared it with my ex. During adulthood. She was sympathetic at first but then used it against me during any fights. Now. I have trust and intimacy issues and feels that I won't be ever experience what it feels to be in a healthy relationship. I feel like Charlie from the book Perks of Being a Wallflower. When I was 7, I attended sleepover as a part of my neighborhood Kea troop. Keas are junior Boy Scouts in my country. There were 30 shish boys all sleeping around the outside of this enormous gymnasium. And I woke in the middle of the night to the 30-something-year-old scout leader hovering above me. He was doing something that it took me years to understand. He then took my underwear and put them in front pocket of my backpack. And whispered to me that he was just changing my underwear because I had wet my pants. And if I didn't want my parents to be mad at me, I best not tell them about this. Many years later, in my 20s, I was shopping at the local Kmart when he walked up to me to ask if I needed help finding anything. Turns out he worked there. I got away from him as quickly as I could. Truth be told, I don't have particularly strong feelings about the whole thing other than a constant feeling of guilt about how many other boys he may have done it to since. Not raped but saw. 17 yo, second day ever at work. Late 30s woman grabbed me by the testicles saying you like this big boy and twisted. I ended up in ed that night with testicular torsion. Lost lefty. Reported to HR. They said I had no complaint as I would have liked it. Sued them. HR lost evidence and said no complaint was ever made. During discovery a newbie in HR. The only male. Put a do not release file into the box accidentally. The lawyer for the employer immediately offered to settle. 12 HR employees were sacked. All female whose initials appeared on the missing file that they all said never existed. No charges ever got laid on any hour nor the woman who saw me. Edit. To answer the question why the file was important. They based their case on not that I was injured but on it never happened at work and I would have reported it to them if it did. Thus hiding that I reported it strengthened their case. That blew that claim up when my lawyer got hold of a file with my complaint and things written on it like how do we make this go away and some other vile comments. My ex-wife handcuffed me to a bed and tried to get me to have a three-way with her and one of my friends. Another guy. She didn't go through with it and played it off as if it was a joke. But it did give me serious trust issues. He was my best mate. We were 19. He put on a game he knew well and declared that the loser of every round had to drink. When that didn't work he gave me pills he said were ecstasy. Scene missing. Scene missing. Suddenly I'm face down and my bole hurts. He sat on the edge of the bed crying and throws me out. I tell nobody but my partner. And we never speak again. Many years later, said partner tries to get us to reconnect. I broke up with her on the spot. Which was the right call. As I found out later she wanted a three-way. With my rapist. The rape, I was okay with. Sort of. I didn't remember anything. Really. But that fucked me up. It took me years to trust anyone again. But I did. The love of someone good is the best curative possible. But if you can't get that, talk to a professional. And if you can't do that, a friend. And if you can't do that, internet strangers. Just don't let it fester. Spoke about it at therapy and got laughed at. Learned the hard way that no one gives a fuck. When I was 16, I was arrested for burglary and spent 6 months in a juvenile facility. One of the counselors sexually assaulted me and several other boys. When he was on night duty, he would show us porn and ask us to compare the size of our penises to one another. He would also show us how to huff inhalants. One of his favorite games he called a space monkey, which involved a boy standing against a wall while the counselor would have his hands on our throats. He'd squeeze until we passed out and watch us wake back up. I sliced my arm open with a razor blade that I stole from a staff member so that I could go to the hospital to tell someone about the abuse. It took 20 stitches to close my arm. Children and Youth Services, as well as the state police, opened an investigation. The boys were sent home. The facility was shut down. And a lawsuit followed. I'm 32 now and am still haunted by it. I was 6 years old when my older brother helped himself to my innocence. Recovery? My parents didn't want anything to do with it, and my brother has been avoiding me ever since I confronted him about it. I'm just stuck with this for the rest of my life, and that's all I got. Edit. To all the people who voted or replied, thank you. I never thought there were so many people who cared. I won't forget about this. Much love to all people here. My brother did various things by framing it as a game of truth or dare. Despite being a strong and threatening dude already, he didn't have to threaten physical violence. He just had to threaten to tell our mother, which is a highlight to level of emotional abuse from that end of the family. Broke away from the family that's most inane at 24. Got therapy. Learned Krav Maga for personal safety. Then dated someone especially abusive, another sexual abuse instance. Get more therapy. Take a 4-year break from dating to finish school and get a job. And start a great relationship. At age 36. My life couldn't be better, smiley face. Cheesy edit. But thanks for the support, everyone. Far and away my most upvoted anything on any platform. And solid support all around. It can be pretty difficult for men to be supported. Or even believed. About this sort of thing. I hope we all stride forward to great lives. I was 15. Had a girlfriend, but I was watching Super Troopers at a friend's house drinking and smoking weed when I fell asleep. I woke up choking on him and immediately vomited, but I was so tired and confused. His brother came down asking what was going on, but was reassured everything was on the up and up. I fell asleep again. When I woke up next, this friend was on top of me and inside of me. Panic and fear. That's all I can remember. Told me to keep it our secret or else he'd tell everyone I was gay. Which at the time, to me, was a social death sentence. He groomed me for months before that and continued to abuse me for another year after. He broke into my house and chased me. Pinned me to the couch. Showed up at my house in the middle of the night. Years have passed since then and he has since passed. I was 15 when it happened the first time. You never recover, you just adapt. You become more protective of yourself and others. More empathetic. More sympathetic. More angry. So much more angry. I've come close to ending my story on several occasions but seem to talk myself out at the last moment. These days I don't trust any man and am constantly in fight or flight. It's exhausting. It happened to me at 8 when my parents would send me to get them some stuff from a mom and pop store. The owner wouldn't be there sometimes and it would be the assistant instead, and at that time she looked like she was in her 30s. IDK, all I know is that she would use Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh cards to lure me closer to her. I trusted her that she wouldn't do anything bad since she was an employee. And one time I asked her if she had some cards in stock and she said she thinks so, but the boxes are in the bathroom, which they were because the place was pretty small, and when I went in, she closed the bathroom door. Put my pants down and she went down on me and gave me a handjob. I was so scared to death because as an 8-year-old, you're not going to understand anything of what's going on, not understand certain feelings and sensations. She traumatized me to the point that I no longer wanted to go to the store, and every time she was around my heart would race so fast and I would get extremely uncomfortable around her. She would put her hands on me and I would just absolutely hate it. I developed trauma from people touching me without my consent. So whenever someone touches me in a way that can be felt or seen as intimate, I shut down and clam up so fast. I don't like anyone whom I don't have deep trust with to be touching me at all. Even my friends now and then startle me and I tense up so bad. I get anxiety and feel like something terrible is going to happen even if it doesn't. Was on a football trip when much younger, and this girl who was in the hotel with her friends told me she wanted to fuck me. I said I had a girlfriend and it wasn't going to happen, but thanks for the ego boost. I went to bed that night after drinks etc., and my mate who was sharing the room with me told me this girl was going around the hotel trying to find my room and had found out where I was. He told me to move room, so I did, and she didn't find me that night. Next day the same thing happened. We all ended up back at the hotel after clubbing etc., and she wouldn't leave me alone. I traded rooms with another friend and went and drunkenly crashed in his room. She somehow got in and was sucking my dick trying to make it hard and was trying to put a condom on me, at least. Another friend saw what was happening, door left open apparently, and shooed her out. I passed out again to wake up to her backed up against me and using my morning wood for sex, without a condom this time. It took me a while to realize what was going on, and I eventually told her to get out. Obviously I then had a massive panic as I had to go home to my girlfriend, and all the lads on the bus knew I'd had sex with somebody. I was about 18 or 19 at the time. My girlfriend wanted sex when I got home and I obviously couldn't do it due to the condom, so told her what happened and she went fucking mental and accused me of cheating on her. At the time I didn't even realize that I'd done nothing wrong, apart from being too drunk to protect myself. And it led to us breaking up for a while before she eventually forgave me. I got an STI from that girl too and had to take a course of tablets. It was a really fucked up situation from somebody old enough to have known better and extremely predatory. I wish I'd been smart enough to realize what was happening, but this was the late 90s and rape against men wasn't a thing that was really thought about. I was raped by two 18-ish-year-old men when I was 9. Life of drug addiction. And I did not know what was wrong with me. My dad was drinking with their father, and doing coke. Drug dealer house? I don't know. Anyways. 28 now. I forgot the entire event that changed my life until 2 years ago. So the trauma of it caused so much pain and agony. But I could not remember it. And I've only just now started to figure things out. So my life was dark and I felt broken for a very long time. Decades of confusion, and then one day at 26 years old. It all came flooding back to me. I feel bad for that little boy. But I will continue to not be the victim. Over 10 years ago, I was almost 24, a man raped me. And after the incident, I got told by a doctor that I should not have this style of sex. My body isn't made for it. She also told me that I am lucky that I was not a woman. If I was, it would be rape. I still feel guilt, shame, fear. Because of that, I don't want people to come close to me and touch me. Cop chick working the desk at the police precinct I went into shamed me for trying to file a report and I didn't bother trying again. Felt pretty disgusting for ages. Guess that feeling went away with time. Getting support was never an option. Australia has no sympathy for boys and men being raped by women. Reading these stories breaks my heart. Rape is rape, regardless of gender. I read every story here and you're all really brave for speaking up about it. I got drunk at her birthday party and went to sleep in her bed because she told me I could. I was drinking underage, so there was no way I was going anywhere until I was sober. I woke up with her on top of me. That's also how I lost my virginity. I recovered for the most part. I still have issues with women I don't know touching me. And am more reserved than I used to be. Had a few drinks at a party. Went to sleep it off. Woke up in the morning with her on top of me. I pushed her off, but by then it was at least the second time she did. Found out a bit later she ended up pregnant. Now I'm paying out the ass for a kid that I did not consent forever. That I'm not allowed to meet because the state took her side and refused to listen to anything I had to say. Twice. Once by a dude when under the influence of too many substances at an after party at a Rondo house. The second time by a woman under the influence of too much alcohol by someone I thought was a friend inside my own house. I'm now 45 and still single with no plans for relationships at all for the rest of my life. My dog ain't pulling that shit on me. First time my half-brother's dad held me down and raped me one night. While everyone else was passed out outside after a party. I was 7. Second time a girl at a party roofied me. And I woke up to her trying to get me to finish inside her. I was 16. Had to deal with it myself as I was told multiple times as a teenager and young adult that men can't be raped. My grandma used to make me give her oral and measured my dick. Jerked me off. Played with my asshole from 10 to 12 years old. I don't think it messed me up too bad. But I am a sex, porn, prostitute addict and alcoholic. To be fair, I was a porn addict since 2nd grade though. 2 instances. First was a coworker of my older brother that offered to buy me alcohol when I was 14. I started drinking young so was excited about the offer. Turns out she expected a transactional relationship that didn't involve money. It made me feel sick at the time, but I went back for a while. My friends would beg me to suck it up and go get us booze. Every time I did JT, I would leave feeling physically ill. She was 26. Second happened when I was 16. I got way too drunk at a party and vomited violently. Couldn't stand. Passed out cold. I have a vague memory of waking up to my face being grinded by a vagina. When I woke up the next day, the girl whose house it was at told me we hooked up. I literally was still wearing the shirt that had vomit on the front. I'm not sure what happened besides that brief memory. I didn't really deal with it until my late 20s when I finally got sober. Therapy helped a lot. I don't tell really anyone about it. Almost every time I've brought it up to male friends or ex-girlfriends. They've responded with, "Sounds like a good time, haha," or mockery. When I met my wife and shared these stories with her after dating for a few months, she responded with so much sympathy and outrage that I started crying. I guess that's all I had been looking for. It was so validating. Got drunk and high. Never recovered. Just living with it. Never figured out how to feel about it. I was 15 at the time. Very abusive relationship. I told my parents. They kinda blew it off. And still do. I told very few friends. And they tried to help as much as they could. But they understandably can't do much. I've thought about going to therapy for it. But I haven't made it there yet. Made me not trust women for a few years. Until I met a very lovely lady that actually listened to me. And helped me through it. She was my first relationship since I was 15. I was 19 when I met her. So there was a lot of stuff I didn't know how to do. And she stuck with me through learning basic relationship stuff. She was great. But we broke up after a year. She lived almost 2 hours away. And she wanted me to move near here and I wasn't ready for that yet. But still, she really helped me patch myself up. And get used to relationships again. She's an amazing woman. And I hope she's doing everything she wants to do. I'm not fully recovered though. There's always some cracks that are there. I just got out of another bad relationship where I was cheated on. And I spiraled for a bit. But I think I'm back on track. Molested multiple times during the first 10 years of my life by my biological father. His girlfriend and his brother, it was not just me. My sisters and mother were also sawed. It has a lasting impact. I've had therapy, guidance counseling. In later life it was antidepressants and more therapy, etc. It sounds stupid, but you grow up thinking it's your fault and that you could have done something to stop it. One thing that helped a lot was being open about it. The more I spoke about it, the less impact it had on me. Eventually, I realized that it wasn't my fault and it helped alleviate my depression. My biological father now suffers from multiple illnesses, so every waking day of his life is painful and it makes me happy. The girlfriend was eventually targeted by them both and she is now in witness protection. The brother was sent to prison and was beaten by inmates daily. He is now dead. It only stopped because a social worker turned up at my father's address and saw us being beaten through the window. I've not seen him since. However, he found me on social media a couple years ago and basically said everything is water under the bridge, and tried garnering sympathy by sending a photo of myself and my sisters. Followed with how he's searching for his long-lost children. He stated he's dying and would love to have a relationship with them again before he dies. He also stated that he'd rather be blocked than left on read, as that would give him an answer. I left him on read. He's had many children since I was born, so I have multiple half-brothers, sisters. I pray to God that they didn't have the same experience that I did. A woman I had dated a couple of times came over to my place for dinner. We hadn't slept together, but we had kissed. We drank a few glasses of wine. I mentioned I had some neck tension. She offered to give me a massage. She said she used to be a massage therapist. I was laying on my back on the floor. As she massaged me, I fell asleep. I woke up at some point later. My pants were pulled down and she was riding me. As soon as I realized what was happening, I made the excuse I needed to pee and got up and went to the bathroom. When I came back, she smiled sheepishly and said, "Sorry. I couldn't help myself. When you fell asleep, I noticed you were hard. We can try again later if you want." I made a joke at the time and said, "Only if I'm awake for it," but the whole thing really freaked me out because I didn't give any kind of consent and the sex was unprotected and I would never normally do something like that. We didn't sleep together again that night. What's confusing about it is that I was attracted to her and sex was likely, but it was only when I mentioned the situation to a woman I'm close friends with she suggested it sounded like I was raped. I was like, nah. I think I wanted it to happen. It was just a weird thing to do is all. But truth is I felt totally taken advantage of and put at risk. I never told anyone else. After I turned 18, I tried dating apps, but suddenly learned to never use it the hard way. I saw this guy on his 20s on Grindr. Looked attractive for me. He told me to go to his place and I was really impatient when he told he's gonna leave town tonight. I was also extremely horny so I went to the place. When I got there, I saw another guy who is older, which I assume on his 40s. Things went awkward and quiet until the older guy threatened me that he'll beat me up and won't let me leave if I don't let him give me oral sex. I had no choice so I just went along. After finishing me, my mind was fucked up. Had to go home and clean myself up as first thing as aside from his bad breath. He also stink really bad that he touched me in most parts of my body too. I returned to that same place the following day to report them to the police but they're gone. I tried telling nearby residents about their whereabouts but they don't know as they barely interacted with the two guys at all. My mom found out about me using Grindr and she scolded me and told me that whatever happened was my fault and I should never have been there in the first place. I lost my focus on schoolworks that time for a few months but thankfully it wasn't bad enough to bring down my grades as a whole. I was in an abusive relationship at a time where gay people weren't as accepted by society and there wasn't much information on what being gay was all about. I got raped several times. Both by the person I was with and his friends that he would bring over. I just thought that it was normal for gay relationships to be abusive. I don't think I ever truly recovered. And I still have issues from it despite years of therapy and treatment. I've mostly just moved on from it and try not to think about it at all. But I still occasionally get attacks where it comes back to me and I shut down. I was 8. It happened 3 times. Within the span of 3 years. Didn't understand what was going on. Got beat up by one of my parents. They went hysterical. I think they just lost their minds. I mean, I can't imagine how I'd feel if I found out my kid got raped. Got treated to dinner by my other parent. I can't remember what we talked about at that diner. All I remember was I felt better about myself afterwards. My family and their family talked and we just don't see them no more. Haven't seen that cousin ever since. Except once, but I avoided them like the plague. As long as I don't think about it then it doesn't matter. Although I've wondered if I ever saw that cousin again should I beat them up or just avoid them like the plague. I don't know. Edit. I'm a straight guy BW. My cousin was a dude. He was 13 at the time. When I was 8 or 9, 2 of my older, 13 to 15, cousins would force me to have anal sex and force me to suck their dicks. On one occasion, he throat fucked me too violently I was spitting up blood for 2 days. This went on for a few months. When I told my mom, she accused me of lying. Horrifying to me. During this same time an uncle, not my cousin's dad, began sexually assaulting me at least 1 to 2 times per month until I was 13 and we moved into the city after my mom's 3rd divorce. I was 13. My mom couldn't go out so she allowed me to drink with her and celebrate. It was such a party, listened to music. Dancing around. Hell, she even broke out a joint. January 1st, 1980 I started the new year naked in bed with my mother. All morning while trying to nurse my first hangover, glimpses of things that were said and done to me by the one person in the world that you should think would never hurt you. The one person that as a child should be able to trust with your life. How did I survive being raped? Mentally and emotionally demonized. I became a 13-year-old prostitute and alcoholic. I allowed hundreds of old perverted men do the same thing my loving family did. Except now I got paid. No more threats to keep quiet or else. Now I had the power and could get results if I did threaten to tell what was done in the DSRK. As a somewhat stable SDULT of 50+ years. I can laugh when I tell people I retired from prostitution at 15 I was a functional alcoholic and eventually drug addict from most of my adult life. I was fortunate enough to have an 18-year relationship, but that ended 11 years ago when he had an aneurysm and my world came to an end. He was the only person in my life that I ever really trusted, and that took years. Since I was 19. I've spent probably 8 to 9 years total in therapy. Group or some form of meetings. Including SAW. To be 100% honest. The fact I've avoided prison or mental institution is a miracle to me. I have been able to maintain my job for 15 years. A few close friends of 20+ years, and I'm generally liked by most. But don't expect a lot from me when it comes to intimacy. I won't let anyone that close. Don't expect me to love you. Because I don't really know what love is. The 18 years was lived out in the world of gay leather men. BDSM and the most open of open relationships. But if you need a shoulder to cry on, need someone to help you move, or need someone to give you a hug and tell you it's gonna be okay, then I'm your man. So I guess overall, I turned out okay. I'm still paying off the alimony and child support. I was 12. It was my brother's wedding. This cousin stayed at our place for a few days. He was 19. I didn't know a single thing about sex. Anatomy of genitals or anything. Never watched porn by then. He introduced me to all this stuff gradually over the days, and I kept leaning towards it. Thought that it was taboo, but okay. We had 2 servicewomen. One 19 and another 8 to 9. He kept telling me how he would force himself on the elder one day and how he will do that. Mindfucked me into believing that it was alright. He flashed in front of me several times. Came once. Showed me porn. Told me his sexual stories with guys. I didn't know what gay or straight meant then. Then one day he called me into the bathroom and asked me to lower my pants, and did it. And then he let me do it because I said it was my turn. After that he asked me to not tell it to anyone. A day or 2 later I tried to force myself on that younger girl once or twice. Not that I knew what to do or how to do it. But still just tried and left. To this day I have very few to no issues about me getting molested. Maybe some few subconscious ones. But I can't forgive myself for the latter part. I tried to explain it to myself that I was young and brainwashed. That I was a child and wouldn't know, but still I wish my past was clear of my abomination. Never after that I had a similar thought of doing this to anyone. But that just breaks me even to this day. I just wish if bad was going to happen. Should have happened to me, not to someone because of me. I went on to become a porn addict. Left it very difficulty. Got therapy. Made myself understand that the first part wasn't my fault, and to some extent the events they followed were also not my fault. I have almost recovered except for what I did. I'm not comfortable discussing it on Reddit because the last time I tried to look for help I was chastised and ostracized. I just want to say, you're brave for asking. I think I saw a similar question get taken down for being loaded. Making fun of women or other such nonsense. But assault needs to be talked about regardless of who the victim is. You mentally twist it as if it was a fantasy you always wanted and that others will be jealous of you for it. Then sleep around when you're legal and be a dom to reassure your own masculinity and avoid showing any sign of weakness or vulnerability. Context. I got a handy and oral from an older female student when I was in grade school. She was in high school, while having no idea what's going on. Was told that a man shouldn't be submissive, and I'd be made fun of if I told anyone a girl took advantage of me. Ever since then, being submissive in bed makes me feel uncomfortable. Even with partners I can trust. I've become more sadistic or domineering because otherwise, it's not manly. An older brother started molesting me when I was 5 years old. Which soon turned into full-in rape. And it went on for years. Until my teens. It caused severe trust and intimacy issues. Along with depression and anxiety. I stayed silent about it. Until one random summer night when I was 15 my mom asked me if something happened. Which I said, yes. That didn't solve any issues though, as we got into a huge argument about my status of continuing to play high school football. Where she said that the sexual abuse wasn't an excuse not to play. As of 2 years ago, I started counseling with a professional specializing in trauma, particularly sexual abuse, and it's helped immensely. Along with some medication. I'm still on the long road to recovery. But I am functioning a bit better. However, I feel that I'll always be a bit off. I was 8. The memory never goes away. I can't read many of these comments without crying or feeling ill, but I just want the guys here to know you weren't to blame. You did nothing wrong, and I hope those who abused you or showed you nothing but sympathy can't sleep at night. I'm so sorry. I learned not to drink alcohol. And certainly don't accept drinks from anyone, including women. I was blackout drunk and woke up to her giving me head then fucking me. I felt confused because I wasn't sure if it was valid. I just drank myself into health problems because I can't afford therapy. Even if I could afford therapy, I seriously don't know what would help me feel better or have a better quality of living. Life goes on. To this day I'm still not sure if I was raped. I mean, I didn't say no. But I also didn't feel like I could say no. I showered so much after. And just continued to feel disgusted with myself. I felt like it was still on me and people could smell it or something. What I learned from this is men barely support other men, even though we cry about lack of support a lot. I was 11. My step-aunt was taking care of me and 4 of my siblings while my mom was in the hospital giving birth. She would make me stand in front of a mirror naked and point out everything she didn't like about my body, fat forming around my underwear line, my big lower lip, my darker skin, etc. Then forced me to go down on her before ultimately using me as a toy whenever she wanted. She threatened to tell my very abusive stepfather that my siblings were being bad, so they would get beatings if I ever told anyone. Which the fear of my siblings being hurt the way I was over the many years was the only thing keeping me from running away. I eventually told someone, my ex, about 14 years later, just to be ridiculed and have it thrown back in my face like I was the one who raped someone. I still haven't recovered. I still see every issue my step-aunt pointed out to this day, even with about 4 years of therapy. It doesn't haunt me anymore though. Not like it used to. Edit. Thank you so much to those who replied and DM'd me. I may have some problems still, but I want anyone that reads this to know that things can still turn around. I'm now married to a woman who almost completely understands me and my past trauma, and have 2 amazing daughters, and I wouldn't change anything that happened to me. If it meant that anything I have now would change. This is going to sound like a Dear Penthouse scenario to some. But it's my trauma, so whatever. I was dating a girl who had some really messed up stuff to me already. A lot of cheating. A lot of gaslighting. A lot of manipulation. We were on another, on-again period, and things seemed to be going okay. She'd always avoided having any contact with my ex-wife. Ex-wife is a bit of a train wreck, but not evil. Just we had problems that fed into one another's and made things untenable. Still, current GF at the time had insane levels of jealousy towards ex-wife. They finally end up in a situation where they have to interact and immediately begin flirting behind my back. Girlfriend denies that this is happening, but ex-wife produces the receipts. When pressed, GF admits that she wants to explore her bisexuality and has hang-ups about it from how she was brought up, etc. I express displeasure with the choice, as the ex-wife already has unhealthy habits of trying to push affection onto me. Girlfriend turns this from me having an issue with this person in particular, turns it into that I don't want her to explore who she is and I'm stifling her. She starts going over to ex-wife's on her days off, even though I'm not okay with it. Calls me asking for permission to go farther because they're making out while I'm there watching her kids. I realize this is going to happen whether I want it to or not. By this point I'm determined I have to go through with this or girlfriend will leave. Why I was so determined for that not to happen I'll never know, but at that point. That's where I was. Finally get everyone together. Threesome starts to happen. I have a legit 100% panic attack. Ex-wife is mortified. Girlfriend feigns sympathy. Girlfriend pulls me into the bathroom and tells me how I'm going to do this because I love her and I just had to deal. I let it go through. Affection steadily decreases between girlfriend and I. She switches up and stops talking to ex-wife and says that I cheated. Now I'm really standoffish. I stay to myself. Don't talk to anyone. Don't date. Don't have much interest. I've thrown myself into my work and that's how I deal. I don't want to say much. But I do want to get it somewhat off my chest after reading others. It happened when I was very young. I have CPTSD from it and subsequent dealings. My therapist suggested that I should reframe the memory. Then suggested my sexual assault could have been checking things worked. I walked out and refused to see him again. Thanks, Jeb. You made a bad situation even worse. Wasn't raped but molested by my brother in my early teens. Inappropriate touching. That kind of thing. He was also even convicted for possession of child pornography later on. I recovered after that because at least there was some kind of karmic justice. Though it was incredibly stressful and took a massive emotional toll on me. Now I just focus on my job. And my mental health. Taking vacations when I can. Not feeling guilty about binging Netflix all day if I want to. Etc. Basically just trying to enjoy life as much as possible to make up for all of the shit that I went through. My ex steeled me by lying about birth control. She did not like that I was still being cautious even when I thought she was on the pill. So one day at a party she was bringing me drink after drink I didn't ask for. I didn't think anything of it because it was a party. She took advantage of me while I was drunk later that night so she could lock her legs around me and stop me from pulling out. I was in denial about it being rape until I brought it up in a feminist subreddit and had multiple people telling me it was rape. The fact that the feminists were the ones who told me I was raped by this woman was enough to eliminate any denial I had over this. I did not recover. I tried to stay with her for the first 2 years of the baby's life. Just to do the right thing. I had to watch people congratulate my rapist for the pregnancy while I pretended I was okay. She also continued to rape me throughout those 2 years. Every time I was too tired for sex and she stayed up screaming and crying until I gave in. It took catching her cheating for me to finally leave. I still pay child support to this day. I am also actively involved in the child's life and put on a smile just for her. But inside I'm miserable because I never wanted kids and was forced into it. If I ever try to talk about it there is always some asshole who tries to victim blame. It's so hard for people to accept the idea that a man can be a rape victim. Girlfriend at the time. Was not going well. She threatened to call the cops and tell them I was abusing her if I didn't have sex with her. Could barely do it. But luckily it was enough. She'd hit me and stuff too. She was 4 feet 11. Hardly a threat. But it's that emotional shit and I would never have hit her first or back. I'm fine from it all. But I'll get a bit snappy if my wife wants sex and I don't and she sort of forces the issue, not at all in a bad way. Just like humps me in a joking way. Same thing with an ex-girlfriend who I was dating right after that nightmare woman I was with. We were both 15 and she expected something from me entirely, but I wasn't ready. I didn't want to physically harm her so I just laid there and she did everything. I always felt so distant from everything ever since. It wasn't until I met my GF, who helped me recover from it and move forward altogether. Unfortunately she passed away a month ago but her words always stay with me forever. I was like 16 and drunk at a house party. Didn't know the girl. I was laying in a bed in one of the back rooms praying I'd stop throwing up. Next thing I know I feel a pressure on my hips and movement. I don't know what TF is going on but suddenly I feel like I'm on the ocean and getting extremely sick from the movement. I open my eyes and the girl is straddling me. I say what are yo and she put her hand over my mouth and said shush. A few minutes or seconds go by I'm not sure and my friend walks in the room and says what are you doing? To the girl and pulls her off of me. How did I recover? I don't care. Never did. No one believed me. I was called a liar. Got yelled at by mom and dad. Beat up by uncle. I was 5. Still not recovered tbh. About to hit 30 and spent half my life in therapy to no avail so far smiley face. My father was never home. I basically lived alone from 10 to 15. He told me the woman across from our apartment was safe. And if there was an emergency I could visit her. I didn't know she was his side chick. And that he had just blown her off. One night I got really scared home alone. I was a very immature 13. I called him and couldn't get him to come home. He was on a date and hung up on me. So I went to her apartment just to not feel terrified. She was drunk in red wine. I know this because the smell of red wine still makes me gag. She immediately assaulted me, screamed at me, told me I'd never be a man. I remember shoving her off and running. For a solid 5 miles to a friend's house. I told my friend's mom everything. She also called my dad. He still didn't come home for another 2 days. He told me if I told anyone, I could go to jail because she fell down when I shoved her. So I had to keep it a secret. I was so scared of going to jail I didn't tell anyone for 20 years. As for the latter part of your question, I never recovered. It had some positive side effects. Consent has always been wildly important to me. I never go near drunk women. But I still see threats everywhere. I honestly don't think you ever do recover. Long story, but on 2 different occasions. First happened with the neighbor's older brother. I was planning to go swim at a swim resort. And since I was a little dude and it was rather far away, Mom insisted on that some older accompanied me. He basically forced me to give him oral sex and even tried to drown me in said bathing place if I remember correctly. Second time was with my older half-sister who said that she wanted to test something IDK what she was up to under that blanket at the time, but when I confronted her years later on that she said something like I had my own problems too at the time and didn't know any better. The only thing that happened to leave this burden behind, if even possible, was to cut contact and never speak to them again. Both of these instances were around of the age of 7 to 9 A few months ago while at my house we had a little kickback party and this girl I had been somewhat messin' with was there. Her and I had talked. I told her about a new budding relationship I was in and we all drank heavily and I had done coke and quite a bit of mushrooms and was getting the spins. I laid down and the girl had followed me up and she was taking off my clothes and the next thing I remember she was on top of me naked. I vividly remember saying no, this isn't what I want, I'm way too fucked for this, and then my memory isn't very clear but I remember having sex that I didn't want and verbally stated as much. My roommate encountered a similar scenario before and it's baffling how we both treated it like a joke as did most people I've spoken to about it. The recovery process has been full on sobriety and just time to make sense of everything. Trying to get back into therapy but I go through the VA which isn't the most ideal place. This thread is so depressing. How almost every story has a side note of shaming victims for being male. My dad was abused by a woman when he was a child and it indirectly caused so many issues in his life such as alcoholism. The fact that he could never really open up about it properly due to the stigma is heartbreaking. Recover? Is that really a thing? I don't think there is recovery if we're all being honest. Early 20s. Went drinking with coworkers and when heading out older coworker asked me to take her to her car. I said okay and she started unzipping my pants and going for it. I felt uncomfortable and told her I didn't feel okay but she kept going. I was shy and didn't fight back or processed what happened after much later. Felt disgusted when I got home and took a really long shower. Didn't process until maybe 10 years later. Told my ex-partner a few months ago and she laughed it off and said why did you get hard then? So yeah, not opening up about that anymore. I mean one can't change anything that has happened in past. For me it was my cousins who did that when I was around 11 years old. I was just there so that they could help me with maths. I shat blood many times but was too scared to talk with someone. No one in my family knows about it. I didn't have the courage to speak or even tell anyone in my family about it. Things are already a bit chaotic amongst family members so I just never felt to tell them a thing. Up until my childhood I didn't even process it properly. Not until I went to college. For many years I tried to cope up with alcohol and drugs, also chronic masturbation that used to help me sleep. Tried some therapists, didn't work out well. My father was also violent back then so I guess that probably also added more. Why was I scared? And in general there are boundary issues in my family so one way or another he would have known. My now ex-wife used to grope me whenever she wanted and would guilt, coerce, bully me into sex. I was kinda into it at first but she started groping me at inappropriate times like in front of her kids. I would tell her to stop and that there was a time and place for that. She would snap back with the same thing. I'm your wife. I can do what I want. Even her kids told her to stop because it made them uncomfortable. She would say the same thing to them. She started doing it in public as well and when I objected she said I was embarrassed to be seen in public with her. It wasn't until I told a lawyer about everything and they looked at me and asked if I knew it was sexual assault what she had been doing that I realized what had been happening. Police won't do anything, they just ignored me and changed the subject when I tried to tell them. TBH, I just ignore it happened to me unless someone else brings it up. Men who have been raped. Please relive your trauma in the comment section in exchange for karma. No. I'm good, thanks. I was 11/12, can't remember my own age these days. I am 25 but constantly forget my birthday. He was 12. We were in the same class. He beat me up and forced his dick in my mouth as a joke behind the PE shed in the school. Threatened me. I was forced to go to his birthday. He did it again. He has a girlfriend now with a house. And I'm a single gay dude who's still going to therapy. Lives in a house of strangers and has little to no hope. I fear I'll never recover. FYI, I was always gay. Luckily I found that out when I kissed an alright lad. From age 5 to 16. Nightly visits from adopted dad. Where he would sodomize and grope me. Often have trouble sleeping, as during stressful times my brain will relive the events as flashbacks or I just sleep fitfully. In my experience I haven't recovered. I am just able to better deal with it some days as opposed to others. Edit. My family is aware what happened to me. But in occasion somethings will come up where they tend to forget because I am a man. We got on the subject of #MeToo. And I mentioned that I believe all victims as dangerous as it leads to situations where someone could be falsely imprisoned or charged. And instead allegations should be considered seriously and false allegations punished. My sister promptly asked me angrily if have you ever been raped? And I replied for 10 years. What about you? At least she had the decency to be embarrassed. Laughed at and high-fived by my friends the following day. They had all watched me get pulled away from the party we were at by a woman I despised and couldn't stand being around. They all knew I was so drunk I could barely stand up and had been about to go home and was therefore in no shape to give any kind of consent. And that I would have said no if I'd been able to. Never been taken seriously about it. 2 different assaulters. One when I was around 5 to 6. And one when I was around 8 to 9. Didn't understand what was going on or what was wrong with what I was doing. I just wanted to fit in with older kids. Then I was raped when I was 19 by a younger girl. I was inexperienced and resistant. But felt deeply emasculated and confused for not being eager about it. It was a tipping point that sent me spiraling into depression. Now I'm married to an incredible woman who keeps me feeling safe and loved. But I don't talk about what happened. So I had just come out a few months prior and I was out by myself, mistake. I had 2 drinks by myself before linking up with a guy on Grindr at the gay bar. He seemed nice. He was a TV reporter for the local news station. Seemed trustworthy. He bought me my 3rd and final drink of that night. I completely blacked out after the 3rd drink. I'm a recovering alcoholic 6 years sober, so 3 drinks was nothing to me. Regained memory being helped into his truck. Regained memory handcuffed to a bed. Then I woke up in front of my house after he had dropped me off. Went to the hospital with my poor dad. Just told him what happened. I DKY, but I remember refusing the rape kit even though I pushed out semen from my butt prior to coming to the hospital. I felt embarrassed. Scared. Vulnerable. Weak. I did however go on post-exposure prophylaxis for HIV. Terrible thing that happened. It was the first guy the first had anal intercourse with. But I guess it's anal rape because intercourse implies 2 parties mutually agreeing to engage in the act. Haven't told many people. The ones I did tell attributed it to my alcoholism. Truth is, I didn't spiral out of control until a few years after that. I really did only have 3 drinks that night. Found out through the grapevine after some time that this guy was putting GHB or some other hallucinogen in people's drinks for a hot minute. Crazy stuff. Really sad situation. But I'm good now. I ended up becoming an nurse. I take all rape allegations very seriously as it's a very delicate process that takes hours to complete accurately. I'm glad I was there for my male patient that came in for sexual assault. I've only done one in practice, but I made sure he knew that it is okay. You are safe here. You can cry. You can feel this way. You are safe here. Lost my virginity to my aunt before I was even 10. Still don't think I've recovered from it. I struggle to even talk to therapists about it. I struggle with thinking I was the aggressor since I'm a dude. It doesn't affect my day-to-day. But it does pop up in my head a lot. No one in my family knows. I'm 26. My dad started raping me when I was around 7 or 8 and it continued until I left home at 22. It was such an unbearable truth that as a child I learned to block it out along with all knowledge of it and completely dissociate from it. It was almost like I created a separate version of myself which would come out when he would rape me in order to keep the horror from the version of me that had to live with him. For this reason I wasn't consciously aware of it while I lived there, and so unfortunately wasn't able to do anything about it even as an adult. As a child my mum had also heavily gaslit me into thinking that it was just a sick fantasy one had because there was something wrong with me, so this also kept it repressed. I only recovered after I moved out and my mind decided it was safe enough to let the memories in. I started to reconnect with the part of me who had been pushed away to hold those memories on his own and welcome him back with love and compassion. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.